The Galactic Council chambers stretched across 3 kilometers of polished black stone, and today the entire galaxy seemed to be watching what would happen inside those ancient walls. Commander Daniel Hayes stood alone on the speaking platform, wearing his dark blue uniform, and he could feel the weight of billions of eyes upon him. Even though most of those eyes belonged to alien beings he had never met before, the holographic representatives of 47 different starfaring civilizations flickered in the air around him, and their expressions ranged from curious to openly hostile. Daniel had been summoned here to answer for the crimes of his species, though he suspected that the verdict had been decided long before his ship had even arrived at this station. High Chancellor Vexthor rose from his seat at the center of the council chamber, and the being looked like living crystal with light pulsing through his translucent body in patterns that Daniel could not begin to understand. When Vexthor spoke, his voice sounded like glass breaking in slow motion, and every word carried the weight of 10,000 years of galactic authority. The human species stands accused of violating the expansion protocols by establishing colonies in 17 forbidden zones and refusing to submit to proper council oversight. How does your species answer these serious charges? Daniel took a slow breath and forced himself to remain calm, even though he wanted to shout at the unfairness of it all. We answer that the so-called forbidden zones were empty star systems with no prior inhabitants and no registered claims from any known civilization. We followed our own laws and our own principles when we established those colonies, and we refuse to accept regulations imposed by governments that have no legitimate jurisdiction over humanity. The chamber exploded with angry voices as dozens of alien delegates began shouting in their native languages, while translation devices struggled to keep up with the chaos. Ambassador Krell from the Saurian Empire stood up on his 6 legs, and his reptilian face twisted with rage as he hissed his displeasure. Your arrogance knows no bounds, human. The Council has maintained peace and order in this galaxy for 10,000 years. Your species has been traveling between the stars for barely 2 centuries, yet you believe you can simply ignore the wisdom we have accumulated over countless generations. Daniel met the ambassador's angry gaze without flinching. We do not ignore wisdom when we encounter it. We question authority that demands blind obedience without first earning our respect through just and fair actions. The Council claims to maintain peace, but from what we have seen, you maintain control through fear and intimidation, rather than through mutual cooperation and genuine respect. More angry voices filled the chamber, and several delegates had to be physically restrained by their aides as tempers flared hot and dangerous. High Chancellor Vexthor raised one crystalline limb high above his head, and somehow that simple gesture brought instant silence to the massive room. The Council has reached its final decision regarding the human problem. Humanity is hereby expelled from the galactic community effective immediately. All human vessels currently operating in Council-controlled space must withdraw to your home system within 30 standard days. Any human ship found beyond your solar system after this deadline expires will be destroyed without warning and without mercy. Furthermore, a military blockade will be established around your star system to ensure compliance. No resources will be allowed in, and no ships will be allowed out. No trade and no contact with any member species. You wanted independence from Council authority humans, and now you shall have complete isolation instead. Daniel felt those words hit him like physical blows, and for a moment he could not breathe as the full implications became clear. Earth depended heavily on imports from a dozen different worlds, including vital medical supplies that could not be manufactured at home, and rare minerals needed for advanced technology and fusion reactor cores that powered everything from cities to starships. Without access to those critical resources, billions of people would suffer, and many would die. You are condemning innocent people to death simply because their government refused to bow to your demands. Vexthor's crystalline face showed no emotion at all. We are teaching your species the humility and wisdom that you clearly lack. Perhaps in a few generations, when you have learned your proper place in the galactic order, the Council will reconsider this decision. Until that day comes, you are alone. The holographic transmission ended abruptly, and Daniel found himself staring at empty air where the Council representatives had been just moments before. Behind him, Lieutenant Karen Price, his communications officer, looked pale and shaken. Sir, we have an incoming message from Earth. President Hamilton wants to speak with you immediately. Daniel nodded and tried to compose himself, even though his hands were shaking with suppressed anger. Patch her through to my ready room. I will take the call privately. President Victoria. Hamilton appeared on the screen in Daniel's small office, and her expression was grim but determined. I watched the entire proceeding, Commander Hayes. The Council broadcasted across every channel they control to make an example of us. How long do we have before this becomes our new reality? 30 days to recall every human ship that is currently operating in Council space and bring them safely home. After that, the blockade begins and we will be completely cut off from the rest of the galaxy. The President leaned back in her chair, and Daniel could see her brilliant mind working through countless scenarios and possibilities. Can we fight them militarily if it comes to that? Daniel hesitated before answering because he did not want to lie to his commander-in-chief, but he also did not want to crush all hope. The human fleet numbers perhaps 300 warships of various sizes and capabilities. That is impressive by our standards, but the Council can deploy thousands of vessels if they choose to enforce this blockade with overwhelming force. In a conventional military conflict, we would be wiped out within days or perhaps even hours. Then we will not fight them conventionally. Hamilton's eyes hardened with determination. Get back to Earth as quickly as your ship can travel, Commander. We have a great deal of work to do and very little time to do it in. The screen went dark and Daniel sat alone in his office for several long minutes trying to process everything that had just happened. His entire life he had believed that humanity's future lay in the stars, and that joining the galactic community would open up unlimited opportunities for his species. Now that dream had been crushed and his people faced isolation or extinction. He stood up and walked back onto the bridge where his crew waited nervously for orders. Set course for Earth. Maximum speed. I want to be home in 5 days, as his ship accelerated away from the Council station and began the long journey back to human space. Daniel gazed out at the stars through the main viewport. The Council thought they had won and thought they had put humanity firmly in its place. They believed that isolation would break human spirit and force his species to come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. Humanity had always done its best work when backed into a corner with no way out. History had proven that time and time again. When faced with extinction, humans did not surrender. They adapted and innovated and fought back with everything they had. The Council was about to learn that lesson the hard way. 3 weeks had passed since the Council had delivered their ultimatum, and the exodus was nearly complete. Every human ship and station and outpost beyond the solar system had been abandoned or deliberately destroyed to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. Millions of colonists who had spent decades building new lives on distant worlds now crowded onto transport vessels heading home to Earth. Captain Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge of her cargo hauler named the Horizon's Edge and watched as the last evacuation shuttle docked with her overloaded ship. She knew she was pushing far beyond safe limits by carrying 3 times the rated passenger capacity, but she could not bring herself to leave anyone behind to face whatever punishment the Council might inflict. That is everyone, Captain. Her first officer, Jake Sullivan, looked exhausted after 3 weeks of non-stop evacuations. We should leave immediately. The deadline is only 7 days away and we are cutting this very close. Lisa nodded and tried to ignore the guilt she felt about the homes and dreams being left behind. Take us out, Jake. Plot the fastest possible course back to Earth and do not worry about fuel efficiency. I would rather arrive home with empty tanks than not arrive at all. The Horizon's Edge groaned in protest as its engines pushed the overloaded vessel forward into the darkness of space. Lisa knew they were vulnerable now because a ship this heavily loaded could not maneuver well and could not fight back if attacked. She just had to hope that the Council would honor their own deadline and not start enforcing the blockade early. 2 days into their journey home, those hopes were crushed. The proximity alarms began screaming their warnings, and Jake's hands flew across his control panel. Contact, Captain. Multiple ships just dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly in our path. They are broadcasting Council identification codes. Lisa felt her stomach drop as she studied the tactical display. How many ships are we facing? 12 frigates and 4 cruisers. They are moving to intercept us, and we cannot outrun them in our current condition. The communication panel lit up with an incoming transmission, and an alien face appeared on the screen. Commander Zith was a member of the Centauran Defense Fleet, and his cold eyes showed no sympathy or mercy. "Human vessel, you are in violation of Council space. Shut down your engines immediately and prepare to be boarded for inspection." Lisa checked the chronometer mounted on her wall. "We still have 5 days remaining before your deadline expires. We are complying with the Council's orders by returning to our home system. The deadline has been moved up by order of the High Chancellor." Zith's expression did not change. "The Council has decided that allowing humans to roam freely through our space poses too great a security risk. Surrender your vessel now and your passengers will be treated fairly according to our laws." Lisa knew exactly what that meant. The passengers would be processed through Council bureaucracy and interrogated for months or even years. The children on board would grow up in detention centers separated from their families. She could not allow that to happen. "Negative, Commander Zith. We are going home and nothing you do will stop us. Then you will die here in the empty darkness between stars and your passengers will die with you." The transmission cut off and weapons fire erupted across the empty space. The horizon's edge shuddered violently as energy bolts hammered into its shields from multiple directions. Lisa yanked hard on the control yoke and sent the cargo hauler into a desperate dive that made the hull groan in protest. "Shields are down to 40%, Captain." Jake's voice remained steady despite the danger. "We cannot withstand much more of this punishment." Lisa's mind raced through possibilities as she threw her ship through evasive maneuvers that should have been impossible for a vessel this size. The cargo hauler had no weapons and no real defensive systems. But it did have something the Council ships would not expect. Human desperation and human creativity had always been a dangerous combination. "Jake, I need you to dump everything in Cargo Bay 3, all of it right now. Captain, that bay contains 10,000 tons of raw construction materials. We need those supplies back on Earth. We will be dead long before we reach Earth if we do not do something unexpected right now. Dump the cargo immediately." Jake hesitated for only a second before hitting the emergency release. The massive cargo bay doors blew open and 10,000 tons of metal debris exploded outward into space like an expanding cloud. The pursuing Council ships were not expecting such a desperate maneuver, and they plowed straight into the field of tumbling wreckage at high speed. Hulls buckled under the impacts and sensors went blind, and 2 frigates collided with each other in a spectacular spray of sparks and atmosphere. Lisa gunned her engines to maximum and pushed the horizon's edge past every safety limit. The hull screamed in protest and warning lights flashed red across every control panel, but they were pulling away from the damaged Council fleet. Jump coordinates are locked in. Jake's hands flew across his controls. Engaging the faster-than-light drive now. Space twisted in ways that human eyes were not meant to perceive, and the cargo hauler vanished from normal space, leaving the crippled Council fleet far behind. When the horizon's edge finally limped into Earth orbit 5 days later, Lisa found herself staring at a completely transformed world. Massive shipyards floated in orbit above every continent, and they were churning out new vessels at a rate that should have been impossible. Weapons platforms bristled from the moon and the asteroid belt like angry metal thorns. Earth had mobilized for total war in just 3 weeks. Lisa and her exhausted passengers were processed quickly through customs, and then she received orders to report immediately to Fleet Command headquarters. She entered a large room filled with military officers and civilian leaders, all studying holographic displays that showed the entire solar system. Admiral Richard Cole commanded Earth's defense forces, and he looked up as Lisa entered. "Captain Morgan, I heard you gave the Council a very bloody nose out there." "Well done, we got lucky, sir. Nothing more than that. Luck or skill, it does not matter anymore." Cole gestured toward the tactical displays floating in the air. "What matters is that you survived and brought your people home safely. The blockade is forming up as we speak. 300 Council warships are surrounding our system in a complete sphere. They believe they can starve us into submission." Lisa studied the display and felt a chill run down her spine. "Can they do it, sir? Can they actually starve us out?" Admiral Cole smiled, but there was no warmth in that expression. "They are about to learn something important about the human species, Captain. We do not starve quietly, and we do not give up when things get difficult. We adapt and we innovate and we survive no matter what obstacles are placed in our path. The Council thinks this blockade is a cage that will contain us. We are going to turn it into their graveyard instead." Dr. Raymond Clark hunched over his workstation in the underground research facility, buried deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, and his eyes were bloodshot from working 72 hours straight without any real sleep. Around him, the best scientific minds that humanity could assemble, worked frantically on dozens of different projects, all racing against a clock that seemed to tick faster every day. The Council's blockade had been in place for 2 months now, and already the strain was beginning to show across Earth. Food supplies were tight but manageable thanks to aggressive farming initiatives and emergency rationing programs. Medical supplies were being stretched dangerously thin, but synthetic alternatives were being developed in laboratories around the world. The real problem that threatened to bring everything crashing down was energy. Earth's massive fusion reactors that powered cities and factories and defense systems all required helium-3 as fuel, and most of that precious element had come from mining operations on the moons of Jupiter. Without access to those facilities, the power grid would start failing within 6 months, and when the power failed, everything else would follow. "Raymond, you need to see this right now," Dr. Patricia Lee called out from across the laboratory, and despite her obvious exhaustion, her eyes sparkled with excitement. Raymond crossed the room to her workstation where complex equations scrolled across multiple screens faster than most people could read. "Please tell me you have good news, Patricia, because I could really use some right now." "Better than good news, Raymond. I've been reviewing all the research data from the Europa station before we had to evacuate it. The team there was running experiments with zero-point energy extraction." Raymond felt his heart skip a beat because zero-point energy was the quantum vacuum energy that existed everywhere in the universe, but every previous attempt to harness it had ended in failure. The Council banned all research into zero-point energy about 30 years ago. They claimed it was too dangerous and too unpredictable to be safely controlled. Patricia grinned like a wolf. "Which is exactly why we should pursue it with everything we have. Look at these readings carefully. The Europa team was getting very close to a breakthrough. They just needed more computational power to stabilize the extraction field and prevent cascade failures. And we have that computational power now thanks to the quantum processors we developed last year." Raymond felt hope stirring in his chest for the first time in weeks. How long would it take to build a working prototype? "With all the manufacturing capacity we have spun up, I estimate 3 weeks if we push hard. Make it 2 weeks. I will clear this project with the president personally and get you whatever resources you need." 17 days later, Raymond stood in the Nevada desert watching nervously as the first zero-point energy reactor powered up for its initial test. The device looked strange and almost alien, with its coiled superconductors and crystalline matrices that bore no resemblance to any conventional power plant. Patricia initiating the extraction sequence now. Her voice came through his helmet radio and sounded tense. The reactor began to hum with a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Reality itself appeared to ripple and shimmer around the device as it reached into the quantum foam that underlaid all of space-time. Energy readings spiked off every chart, and for one terrifying moment Raymond feared they had miscalculated badly, and the reaction would cascade out of control and destroy everything within 100 kilometers. Then the readings stabilized and settled into a steady pattern. Clean, limitless power flowed from the reactor in amounts that could power an entire city indefinitely. "We actually did it, Patricia." Raymond felt tears in his eyes. "We really did it." Within 1 month, zero-point reactors were being installed and activated all across Earth and throughout the solar system. The power crisis that had threatened to cripple human civilization vanished almost overnight. But Raymond knew this was only the beginning of what they could accomplish. If humanity could successfully tap into zero-point energy, then what else might be possible? The answer came from a completely unexpected source. Lieutenant Commander Ben Harris was a young engineer who served on one of Earth's orbital defense platforms, and he had been tinkering with ship propulsion systems during his off-duty hours. He discovered quite by accident that by carefully modulating zero-point energy through a specially configured field generator, he could create a localized distortion in the fabric of space-time itself. His first test nearly destroyed his entire laboratory when it punched a clean hole through 3 reinforced bulkheads. His second test opened what looked like a gateway to a point 300,000 kilometers away, and Space Admiral Cole immediately classified all of Ben's research as top secret and diverted massive resources to its development. Within weeks, human scientists working around the clock had developed what they called the skip drive. It was a faster-than-light propulsion system that did not rely on any conventional physics, and it bypassed all the limitations built into Council-designed engines. Human ships equipped with skip drives could move through space in ways that their enemies could not predict or counter or even follow. But perhaps the most revolutionary innovation came from an unlikely collaboration between military, weapons researchers, and civilian video game developers. Someone realized that the same neural interface technology used for immersive gaming could be adapted and modified for use in ship combat systems. Captain Greg Foster volunteered to be the first test pilot for this experimental technology. He was strapped into a small fighter craft barely 10 meters long, and his mind was directly connected to every system through a neural interface helmet. When he thought about turning left, the ship turned left instantly. When he focused his attention on a target, the weapons systems locked on automatically. The response time was measured in mere milliseconds, which was far faster than any conventional control system could ever achieve. This is absolutely incredible. Greg reported during his first test flight, and his voice was filled with wonder. It feels like the ship is part of my own body. I'm not flying it in the traditional sense. I am the ship. Admiral Cole watched the test from a ground control station and saw the tiny fighter perform maneuvers that should have been completely impossible according to every law of physics he understood. The ship twisted and accelerated and stopped on a tiny point, defying inertia and momentum. How quickly can we manufacture these neural interface fighters? The neural interface hardware is currently our main bottleneck. The lead engineer studied his production schedules. But if we prioritize this project and divert resources from other programs, we could have 1,000 operational fighters within 6 months. Cole nodded grimly. Make it happen and do not let anything stand in your way. The Council is about to learn a very painful lesson. They did not just isolate humanity when they imposed this blockade. They gave us the time and motivation we needed to evolve far beyond anything they can imagine or counter. The Council fleet that maintained the blockade around Earth's solar system had settled into a routine that bordered on comfortable. For 4 long months they had enforced the quarantine without facing any real challenges or incidents. Human vessels occasionally tested the perimeter, but they always turned back when confronted with overwhelming force. Fleet Admiral Takesh commanded the entire blockade operation from his massive flagship, called the Eternal Dominion, and he reviewed the daily status reports with growing satisfaction. The humans were clearly learning their lesson about defying Council authority. Perhaps in another year or 2 they would be ready to beg humbly for readmittance to the galactic community and accept whatever terms the Council chose to impose. That comfortable complacency shattered completely at exactly 0300 hours. Admiral, we are detecting multiple anomalies on our sensors. The tactical officer's voice carried an edge of confusion. Something is emerging from the human homeworld, but the readings do not make any sense. Takesh studied his holographic displays with growing concern. Dozens of contacts were appearing on the tactical grid, and the small craft were moving at speeds that should have been completely impossible. They did not register properly on the standard faster-than-light detection systems because they were not using any kind of drive technology the Council recognized. Engage all contacts immediately. Show these foolish humans the price of their continued defiance. The Council fleet opened fire with everything they had and unleashed a devastating barrage of energy weapons that should have vaporized the approaching human craft in seconds. But somehow the human ships simply were not where the weapons struck. They skipped and vanished and reappeared somewhere else, entirely moving in patterns that seemed to defy all logic and prediction. Then the human ships began returning fire with weapons of their own. The weapons the humans used were not sophisticated energy beams or guided missiles. They were simple kinetic penetrators, which meant metal rods accelerated to nearly the speed of light, using their new zero-point energy technology. When those rods struck Council ships, they did not just damage the hulls. They punched straight through armor plating that was supposed to withstand anything, and the kinetic energy turned advanced durasteel into expanding clouds of vapor. The Eternal Dominion rocked violently as one of the human penetrators grazed its shields and overloaded them instantly. Takesh stared in complete disbelief as his flagship's defensive systems that were designed to withstand the most advanced weapons in the known galaxy failed in mere seconds. All ships execute evasive maneuvers immediately. Takesh struggled to keep his voice calm. Reform into defensive positions and concentrate your fire. But the human pilots, with their minds directly linked to their tiny craft, were already anticipating every move the Council fleet made. They flowed through the massive formations like water flowing through a fishing net, and struck with surgical precision, before retreating faster than return fire could possibly lock onto them. In just 20 minutes, the Council lost 17 ships. In 1 hour, the number of destroyed vessels climbed to 43. Takesh finally gave the order that he never thought he would have to issue. All ships retreat beyond the system boundary. We are withdrawing to regroup on Earth, President. Hamilton watched the entire battle unfold, from the Fleet Command Center deep underground, and she stood beside Admiral Cole as the last Council ship vanished from their sensor displays. The command center erupted in cheers and celebration, but Cole remained quiet. They will come back, Victoria. And next time they will bring many more ships and be far more cautious. I am counting on exactly that, Richard. Hamilton's expression was grim. Send an official message to the Council. Tell them we are ready and willing to negotiate an end to this blockade under reasonable terms. Cole raised one eyebrow in surprise. You actually think they will agree to negotiate after we just humiliated them? No, I do not think they will listen. But I want them to clearly know that we tried to find a peaceful solution. What happens next will be entirely on them, and history will record that. The Council's response arrived within 3 standard days. High Chancellor Vexthor appeared on every communication channel that existed and addressed not just humanity, but the entire galactic community in a speech that was broadcast across thousands of worlds. The human species has now revealed its true violent nature to everyone. They have launched unprovoked attacks against Council peacekeepers, who were simply maintaining order, and they used weapons of unprecedented and terrifying destructiveness. This blatant aggression cannot be allowed to stand unpunished. I am hereby authorizing the formation of the largest punitive fleet in galactic history. Humanity will be subdued completely. Their dangerous technology will be seized and studied. Their world will be placed under direct Council administration for the foreseeable future. This decision is final and not open to negotiation or discussion. The message ended, and Hamilton turned to face her assembled cabinet members and military advisors. How long until their punitive fleet arrives in our system? Our intelligence assets estimate approximately 2 weeks. Director Norman Blake ran Earth's intelligence operations, and he looked worried. They are pulling warships from military bases all across the galaxy. Current projections suggest we could be facing as many as 2,000 vessels. The enormous number seemed to suck all the air from the room. Even with all their revolutionary new technology, Earth could not possibly fight off a fleet that size. Then we have exactly 2 weeks to prepare for the fight of our lives. Hamilton's voice cut through the despair. Admiral Cole, I want every single ship we have ready for combat operations. Director Blake, activate every intelligence asset we have operating in Council space. I want detailed information about that fleet, including its composition and command structure and supply lines. And someone locate Dr. Clark immediately. I have a very special project that requires his unique talents. Raymond arrived at the presidential office within 1 hour, still wearing his stained laboratory coat. Madam President, I came as quickly as I could. What do you need? Hamilton leaned forward, and her eyes were hard as steel. Raymond, I need you to build me a weapon. Something that will make the Council think twice about ever threatening Earth again. What kind of weapon are you asking for? Hamilton did not hesitate. The kind of weapon that ends wars before they can truly begin. The kind that saves lives by being so terrible that no one dares to use it. Can you do that for me, Raymond? Raymond was quiet for a long moment as he considered the implications of what she was asking. Then he nodded slowly. Yes, Madam President, I believe I can. But you need to understand that what I am proposing will change everything. Once this weapon exists, the galaxy will never be the same again. I understand the weight of what I am asking. Hamilton's voice softened slightly. But I would rather change the galaxy than watch Earth burn. Do whatever you need to do, Raymond. You have my full authorization and unlimited resources. 2 weeks later, the Council's massive punitive fleet arrived at Earth's solar system, in what could only be described as an overwhelming display of military force. 2,300 warships representing 37 different alien species arranged themselves in a battle formation that stretched across millions of kilometers of space. It was without question the largest military force ever assembled in recorded galactic history, and every ship bristled with enough weapons to crack a planet. High Chancellor Vexithor commanded the enormous fleet personally from his position aboard the super dreadnought, named Celestial Judgment. As his vessel took its position at the very center of the formation, he opened a direct communication channel to Earth. Humans, this is your final opportunity to surrender without further bloodshed. Stand down all of your defensive systems immediately and submit to Council authority. If you cooperate fully, your casualties will be kept to a minimum. If you refuse, we will reduce your entire world to lifeless rubble. You have exactly 1 hour to make your decision. On Earth, President Hamilton sat in the command center, buried deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, and she was surrounded by all of her military leaders and scientific advisors. Admiral Cole stood to her right looking grim, while Dr. Raymond Clark stood to her left looking pale and nervous. Madam President, are we truly ready to do this? Raymond's voice shook slightly. I need to stress the risks one final time. If our calculations are wrong by even a tiny fraction of a percent, we could accidentally destroy our own planet and everyone on it. Hamilton's voice was steady and calm. And if we do not use this weapon, Raymond, then the Council will definitely destroy our planet and everyone on it. The choice is clear, even if it terrifies us. Activate the device when ready, Dr. Clark. Raymond took a deep breath and entered the activation codes with trembling fingers. High above Earth, hidden among the thousands of defense satellites, a small sphere of exotic matter began to pulse with barely contained energy. The sphere was only 3 meters across, but it contained the absolute pinnacle of everything humanity had learned about zero-point energy manipulation and space-time physics. Raymond pressed the final button and the device activated. A wave of invisible distortion rippled outward from Earth at speeds faster than light itself, moving like a tsunami through the fabric of reality. It was a carefully controlled manipulation of the fundamental structure of space-time. The weapon did not destroy matter or release devastating energy. Instead, it did something far more subtle and far more devastating to any advanced civilization. It temporarily severed the connection between normal matter and the quantum vacuum energy that permeated all of space. Across the entire Council fleet, every zero-point reactor suddenly stopped functioning. Every faster-than-light drive went completely dark. Every energy weapon fell silent. Every shield generator failed. Life support systems that depended on quantum technology began shutting down. 2,300 powerful warships became 2,300 floating coffins in the span of mere seconds. On the bridge of the Celestial Judgment, emergency lighting kicked in as backup systems struggled desperately to compensate for the catastrophic failures. Vexthor stared at his dead control panels in complete incomprehension, unable to process what had just happened. What have these humans done to us? His voice was barely a whisper. The answer came through a simple communication sent on old-fashioned radio waves, which was one of the very few technologies still functioning properly. This is President Victoria Hamilton of Earth. Your entire fleet has been disabled but not destroyed. Your crews are all still alive and will remain alive. In approximately 10 hours, the effect will dissipate completely, and your ships will regain full functionality. Please consider this a demonstration of restraint on our part. We could have killed every single one of you. We deliberately chose not to do so. Hamilton paused to let those words sink in before continuing. The Council believed you could punish humanity for simply seeking freedom and independence. You were completely wrong. You believed you could crush us with overwhelming numbers and superior firepower. You were wrong about that as well. You believed your technology was so advanced that it could never be challenged or surpassed. You were most definitely wrong about that assumption. Another pause for emphasis. Humanity is not your enemy, Chancellor Vexthor. We never wanted this conflict. We never sought confrontation. You forced it upon us because we refused to bow meekly to your authority and accept your rules without question. Now you see the result of your actions. We do not need your permission to exist among the stars. We do not require your approval to grow and explore and build new homes. We certainly do not need your protection or guidance. Hamilton's voice hardened. Here are our terms, and they are not negotiable. The blockade ends immediately and completely. Human vessels will have free and unrestricted passage through all areas of Council-controlled space. Any future attempts to interfere with human colonies or legitimate human interests will be met with an appropriate and proportional response. Finally, the Council will formally recognize Earth's full sovereignty and our absolute right to self-determination as an independent species. In return for these terms, we offer the following. We will share our medical technology freely with all Council member species. We will open fair trade negotiations on completely equal terms. We will never use our space-time disruption weapon except in clear cases of self-defense against existential threats. These terms are final and non-negotiable. You have 10 hours to consider them carefully before your ships regain power. We strongly suggest you choose wisely this time. The transmission ended and Vexthor sat alone in the darkness of his crippled flagship, facing a situation he had never imagined possible. Everything he had believed about the Galactic Order and the Council's natural supremacy, and humanity's proper place in the universe, had been proven completely false in just a few terrible minutes. When the Council fleet systems finally came back online exactly 10 hours later, Vexthor contacted Earth with a single word transmitted clearly. Agreed. 3 months passed and Captain Lisa Morgan piloted a small diplomatic shuttle toward the Council chambers. This time she was not fleeing in fear. She was arriving as Earth's official ambassador with full authority to negotiate treaties. The Council had changed dramatically in the wake of humanity's demonstration of power. The galactic community still existed, but it was no longer a rigid empire. It had transformed into what it always should have been, which was a forum for equals rather than a hierarchy with the Council sitting on top. Lisa walked confidently into the main chamber where High Chancellor Vexthor waited for her arrival. The tall crystalline being somehow looked smaller and less certain than before. Ambassador Morgan, welcome to the Council. We are eager to begin formal diplomatic relations with Earth under the new arrangement. Lisa smiled warmly. We are equally eager, Chancellor. But let us be absolutely clear about one fundamental thing. We are not here as supplicants or subjects begging for favors. We are here as full partners and complete equals in every sense. Vexthor remained silent for several long moments before finally inclining his head in what might have been genuine respect. Yes, Ambassador Morgan, equals. The Council has learned that particular lesson very well indeed. As Lisa took her seat at the large negotiating table, she thought about everything humanity had endured to reach this historic moment. The exile and the blockade and the terrible war that had nearly destroyed everything. They had been pushed to the very edge of extinction and forced to evolve beyond what anyone thought possible. The Council had opposed humanity, and in doing so had created exactly what they feared most. A species that could not be controlled or contained or defeated. The Council had doomed themselves the moment they tried to cage humanity. They just had not realized it until far too late. Looking around the chamber at the assembled delegates from dozens of different worlds, Lisa allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The galaxy would never be the same again, and that was exactly what it needed. The age of human exploration had truly begun.